Yeah, start, madam.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Myself, Dr. Veena Venkatesh from Ajanta Pharma Limited, working as a General Manager, Medical Services. On the behalf of Ajanta, I take this opportunity to welcome all the delegates for this scientific forum. Ajanta Pharma is one of the top pharmaceutical companies in the cardiology segment, and it is known for bringing innovative formulation for the first time in India. Today's scientific session would be azilidipine, a novel calcium channel blocker beyond hypertension. I'm privileged to introduce the faculty over here. We have Dr. Smith Srivatsava. He's a MD, DM cardiologist at Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Medical College, Raipur, and he would be the moderator. The speaker would be Dr. Mahesh Fulvani, is MD, DNB, DM cardiologist at Sri Krishna Rudralaya and Critical Care Center, Nagpur. And the panelist we have Dr. Sachin Lakhade. He is MD, DNB cardiology, Hriday Sparsha Heart Care Center, Pune. And I request all the delegates to type their questions in the chat box. With this a brief introduction, I would like to hand over this session to Dr. Smith Srivatsava. Sir, please.
Dr. Srivastava, your voice is not audible.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Veena. It's a pleasure to be here. And hypertension in India is, or any place else, it's a burning disease, and it's a widespread disease that we have to be very concerned. And with time, newer molecules have come, but our use of newer molecules is limited usually because of our understanding for that molecule. And probably for that reason, I think Dr. Fulvani's lecture today would be would benefit us in this way, that we can have an understanding of newer molecules, because once we have a practice of writing a particular molecule like atenolol was practiced in, say, 10 years back, it was the number one molecule used by everyone because everyone was comfortable with that. But gradually, when our understanding came that beta blockers do not benefit in, they only lower the blood pressure figures, do not have other benefits. It was, the transit from not using beta blockers to using other molecules was slow, and probably because of the fear of newer molecules. And therefore, I welcome today Dr. Mahesh Fulvani, that he can throw light and have our confidence developed for using these newer molecules and what is actually the best molecule to be used for our patients. Dr. Fulvani, to you.
Thank you, Dr. Srivastava. As you said that we had initial fear of not using atenolol or, for that matter, other beta blockers, just because we were not very much familiar with the molecules. But then with the time and understanding and repeated readings, we have come to know that more than beta blockers, there are many more good molecules, especially ACE inhibitors, ARBs, newer calcium channel blockers, which do control not only blood pressure, but they help patients survive longer, decrease their morbidity, mortality, protect their kidney functions, protect their, prevent the stroke, etc., etc. So one of the new molecule that is a calcium channel blocker, that is azilidipine, I will be discussing now in next maybe half an hour or so, and then we will discuss about this drug or maybe any other aspect of hypertension. I would be discussing about some hypertension epidemiology. Then I will go into azilidipine drug profile, what is its cardiac perspective, nephro perspective, diabetic perspective, and then discussion. We all know that hypertension is the most prevalent chronic disease everywhere in the world. In India, almost 40% urban Indians have hypertension, and in rural area it is around 15 to 20%. This is more important that for every known hypertensive patient, there are 2 cases of undiagnosed hypertension. That means almost 67% population who are hypertensive are not aware that they are hypertensive. And there is considerable gap in detection and control of hypertension. We usually follow this, that 30% population is knowing that they have hypertension, out of which 30% population takes the drug, out of which 30% population is controlled. So control is very limited number of population of hypertension is controlled, and thus this exposes a large number of population to cardiovascular risk profile. Hypertension is always called as a silent killer, and reason we know why hypertension is increasing or what are the main factors that contribute to the development of high blood pressure and its complication are social determinants and drives like globalization, urbanization, aging, rising income, more education, social lifestyle, adding to behavioral risk factors like unhealthy diet, excessive use of tobacco or smoking, physical inactivity, harmful use of alcohol, causing high blood pressure, adding to obesity, causing diabetes, raised blood pressure, blood lipids, and then cardiovascular disease adds to heart attacks, stroke, heart failure, and kidney disease. Current antihypertensive drugs, what is there in our armamentarium? We have 10 classes of drugs. 10 classes of drugs. That is, we have alpha blockers, we have beta blockers, we have alpha and beta blocker, we have calcium channel blocker, we have ACE inhibitors, we have ARB, we have direct inhibitors, there are diuretics, there are central sympathomimetics, and there are direct vasodilators. So these are 10 classes of antihypertensive drugs which are available with us. ACC guidelines say that whenever the blood pressure is less than 120/80, it is normal. I would not go in depth of it, but we know what is stage 1 of hypertension, what is stage 2 of hypertension. Goal of hypertension, that is blood pressure control, is less than 130/80. Both ESC and ACC give the same figure of control of hypertension, that is goal of blood pressure control. Hypertension management guidelines, in all guidelines, they say that uncomplicated hypertension, calcium channel blockers are one of the first line antihypertensive agents, right? That is uncomplicated. I'm saying clearly that it is in uncomplicated hypertension, calcium channel blockers are the first antihypertensive lines, among the first antihypertensive lines. What are these calcium channels? What are our targets in the management of hypertension? There are 3 types of calcium channels: L-type, T-type, and N-type. I'm going slightly in physiology because unless we understand this, we will not understand what is azelaprine doing. There are 3 types of calcium channels: L-type, T-type, and N-type. L-type are localized on smooth muscles, skeletal muscles, somewhere in the heart and on the kidney. And what do? They cause excitation, contraction, coupling of skeletal muscles and smooth muscles. They cause constriction of afferent arterioles of the kidney. T-type of calcium channels are located on heart, kidneys, and adrenals, and they cause increased pacemaker fire of SI node. They cause constriction of afferent and efferent arterioles of kidney, and they cause aldosterone synthesis and secretion. N-type of calcium channels are there on sympathetic nerves, and they cause release of norepinephrine. There are some detrimental effects of T types of calcium channels. Once they are activated, on kidneys, they cause vasoconstriction of both afferent and efferent arterioles. They cause release of renin. They facilitate fibrosis in renal parenchyma and blood vessels. So it is very bad. On the adrenal, they cause increased synthesis of aldosterone synthesis and secretion. On the heart, there is increased heart rate. There is increased risk of arrhythmia, and they cause aldosterone-induced hypertrophy. They facilitate aldosterone-induced hypertrophy, and they cause bad remodeling of the heart. So, what if you block these type of calcium channels? What will happen? Let's know what nifedipine does. Nifedipine does block only L type of calcium channels. That means N type and T type are not touched at all. They are unaffected. Amlodipine also similarly causes only blockage of L type of calcium channel. Cilnidipine blocks L and N type of calcium channels. Ifnodipine and azelaprine block L and N type. So what happens? If I block L type of calcium channels, it causes decrease in heart contractility of heart, because it is causing, if I go back 2 slides, I'll show you that L type of calcium channel cause excitation, contraction, coupling, and constriction of afferent arterioles. So if you block that, there is decreased contractility of the heart, there is increased pulse rate, and there is increased glomerular pressure. So that is only good thing is causing is decreasing contractility, but it is causing increase in pulse rate, and it is causing increased intravenous pressure. N type of calcium channel blockers will cause decreased heart rate because they are blocking sympathetic nerve terminals, decreased pulse rate, and they decrease glomerular pressure. P type of calcium channel, they are blocked, they will cause decreased heart rate, decreased pulse rate, decreased intravenous pressure, and they will prevent aldosterone synthesis and secretion. That's the beauty of it. And hence, we have a new chemical structure that is called as azellipine. It is a dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker, and it blocks, as I said, L and T type of calcium channels. So what is the mechanism of action? It blocks the T type of calcium channel present on zona glomerulosa of the kidney, and it inhibits aldosterone synthesis and release. It blocks T type of calcium channel present on the SA node, and it delays the phase 4 of the action potential, and therefore decreases the intrinsic increase in the heart rate of the SA node. There is enhanced cardio protection because of this drug. As I said, it inhibits L and T type of calcium channel blockers, and it has, of course, a good anti-hypertensive action. It prevents reflex tachycardia. It reduces sympathetic nervous system. It decreases myocardial oxygen demand, and it prevents myocardial hypertrophy and remodeling. It improves myocardial oxygen supply by the increased coronary blood flow, and it decreases arrhythmogenicity by modulating the autonomic nervous function. So we have a potent antihypertensive drug, and it has plethora of action. You can see right from right left upper corner to right lower corner. There are n number of good effects which is written over here. Pharmacokinetics of this drug, it has onset of action of almost 2.5 hours, and duration of action, half-life is almost 19 hours. So obviously it will be a single dose drug. If you see, it undergoes extensive first pass metabolism and primarily is metabolized by cytochrome P450, and therefore drugs which block this will prolong the half-life of this drug. And it is primarily excreted unchanged in feces and almost 25% in the urine. In specific population like renal impairment, we don't have good studies, so therefore it has not been established. Severely hepatic renal function, hepatic patient, severely hepatic impaired patient, efficacy has not been documented. In pediatric population, efficacy has not been established. In elderly population who are more than 75 years of age, we have to use a lesser dose. In pregnancy and nursing mother, it is not recommended. So the contraindication is hypersensitive to any of these ingredients. Pregnant and nursing women, concomitant administration of systemic azole, for example, fluconazole, and concomitant administration of HIV protease inhibitor like atazanavir. So as I said, these drugs which inhibit CYP3/4A, that is cytochrome P450, they will increase the concentration of azellipine in the body and will enhance the effect. Digoxin, this drug will increase the effect of digoxin. So in preclinical studies, the effects were proven that there was a negative inotropic, chronotropic effect. It inhibits aldosterone synthesis and secretion. It dilates more efferent arteriole, and it prevents insulin signaling and glucose uptake. So these were the preclinical studies done on this molecule. And then let us see some clinical studies. Let us review some of the trials because of which we confidently can say that this drug will definitely help our patient. Azellipine cardiac perspective, I will discuss few studies. For example, this study, that is at-home study, that is use of azellipine home monitoring of blood pressure and efficacy by patient itself, conducted in Japan. A good number of population, almost 5,000 patients who had their morning and evening blood pressure self-monitored by automatic instrument and recorded, and they were given azellipine or amlodipine. What have they found? That the morning blood pressure decreases significantly. The evening blood pressure, systolic as well as diastolic blood pressure, decreases significantly over 16 weeks. The heart rate does not change, or it decreases slightly. But more important, this is a beautiful study. I will just make it smaller so that we can show you. This is a beautiful study. What they have done, they have recorded morning blood pressure and evening blood pressure, and the difference in the morning and evening. That means they want to show you that whether morning blood pressure is more or evening blood pressure is more, and classify patients according to that. If they have morning predominant hypertension, that means they have more blood pressure in the morning hours. Almost 20% of population was such. And after the end of the study, after 16 weeks of azellipine, morning predominant blood pressure was there only 8%. So that means their morning blood pressure was controlled in significant number of population. Similarly, when the patient has sustained blood pressure, almost 70% patient had sustained blood pressure. That means morning and evening both increased, and it decreased to 50% or 40% population has sustained blood pressure. So it goes to say there is significant reduction in home systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Blood pressure lowering effect lasts till next day morning, because I said that morning predominant blood pressure, which was seen in 20% of population, they dropping to almost 8%. And we all know that this is the morning blood pressure, which is killer for patient from 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock in the morning. There is maximum incidence of acute trauma and strokes. So it is useful for patients with morning hypertension who are high risk of cardiovascular events, especially strokes. So there are a few more studies like inhibitory effects of azithromycin on morning hypertension. You see the morning blood pressure was recorded in almost 5,000 odd patients, and it dropped from 156 to 137 within 16 weeks. It controlled very well, and beautifully that in the same group of population, heart rate, which was average 72, and is dropped to 68 after enough 16 weeks. So azithromycin offered significant reduction in morning blood pressure along with slight but significant decrease in heart rate. Azithromycin was compared to amlodipine in quite a few number of studies. A comparison of their pharmacokinetic effect on ambulatory blood pressure monitoring. So it was done that patients were given either amlodipine or azithromycin, and their ambulatory blood pressures were monitored over after they were given adequate duration of treatment. What was found that azithromycin is controlling blood pressure to a similar extent to the amlodipine. Almost you can see minus 13 systolic, minus 8 diastolic blood pressure at the end of 16 weeks. But azithromycin is decreasing heart rate by 2 and amlodipine is increasing heart rate by 4. This is significant change. That means they are controlling blood pressure as well as decreasing their heart rate. Azithromycin and amlodipine in Chinese essential hypertensive population, what they found that azithromycin decreases blood pressure significantly, but it also increases the heart rate. But here, what they found that azithromycin is decreasing blood pressure more than amlodipine. You can see, I'll show you. You can see this azithromycin is decreasing blood pressure from 150 to 130, as against amlodipine is decreasing from 150 to 134. And this difference of 134 versus 129 is significant. So this p-value comes to significant, right? So in conclusion, it says that azithromycin significantly decreases blood pressure, which was greater than amlodipine. Clinical use of azithromycin in treatment of hypertension in Chinese population, and it was observed. This was a meta-analysis of almost 23 articles from China, and it clearly shows that azithromycin decreases blood pressure equivalent to amlodipine, and it decreases the heart rate also. Impact of azithromycin and amlodipine on left ventricular mass. This is a beautiful study. I like it very much. On left ventricular mass and their longitudinal function in hypertensive patients with left ventricular hypertrophy. So the study was conducted to compare the effect of azithromycin and amlodipine on LV function. What was done? Drug was given for almost 16 weeks and almost 1 year, and their LV function and morphology was examined by conventional 2D echocardiogram, speckle tracking echo, both at baseline and then at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. What it shows that GLS has improved significantly by 3 months. At 3 months, it is increasing from minus 15 to almost minus 17. So it has significantly improved by 3 months of treatment, and there is further regression of LVH observed at 12 months. In the aorta study, what was done? That means what they wanted to evaluate, that addition of azithromycin versus amlodipine on their central blood pressure. We are by now measuring our cuff blood pressure, that is peripheral arterial blood pressure. Now this was central blood pressure measurement and their LV mass index. Patients were given olbisartan for 12 weeks, and then after 12 weeks of olbisartan monotherapy, they were added either azithromycin or amlodipine. And further 24 weeks, they were monitored for their central blood pressure and left ventricular mass index. What was found that azilipin group had significant decrease in central blood pressure as compared to amlodipine group. Also, there was significant decrease in the left ventricular mass index. So it goes to say that it has a cardioprotective effect. Now let's revise some clinical evidences on kidney protection. By far, we always are interested in urinary protein excretion when the patient has hypertension. We measure their urinary protein excretion every 3 months, 6 months, or a year. And in this study, what was done that hypertensive patients with CKD were given azilipin 60 mg daily or amlodipine 5 mg daily for 6 months. And what was the end point was change in blood pressure, heart rate, and urinary protein excretion and urinary levels of 8-OH-DG, urinary LFEB measurements before 3 and 6 months afterwards. So what was found that blood pressure is controlled well by both the drugs. Heart rate is dropped significantly from 74 to 71 by azilipin, and it increases from 76 to 79 amlodipine. But more important, as I said, we are interested in urine protein excretion. In the azilipin group, it has dropped from 1.5 grams per day to 0.8. It is almost 50% decrease in the urinary protein excretion. As against in amlodipine group, it did not change. So it continued to leak proteins. So this was one result. And more importantly also, that urinary OH-DG and urinary LFEB, these are markers of tubular interstitial dysfunction and oxidative injury of the hypertension and other things. So these are decreasing when the patient is given azilipin. You can see that in urinary protein, as I said, from 1.5 it is dropping to 0.9 at 3 months and 0.8 at 6 months. Urine OH-DG is decreasing significantly, and urinary LFEB is decreasing significantly, right? So this proves that it is giving some protection to kidney as far as their urine protein excretion is concerned and their tubular interstitial damage. So you can conclude from the studies that baseline proteinuria was correlated with baseline urinary LFEB levels. Azilipin ameliorated markers of glomerular and tubular interstitial injury, right? This is glomerular, proteinuria is glomerular function, and these two markers are of tubular interstitial injury, so it is decreasing. Urinary OH-DG is a sensitive marker of oxidative DNA damage, and it is also decreasing significantly, right? So it has a potent antioxidant effect. Effect of azilipin on urinary metabolism, uric acid metabolism. Here also the uric acid levels, serum uric acid levels are decreasing, though not very significantly, but at least to some moderate extent. As far as the diabetic perspective is concerned, what was done? It was a crossover study. The patients were given, at baseline, their OGTT, that is oral glucose tolerance test was done. They were given azilipin 60 mg daily for 12 weeks. Then again their OGT was done, and they were crossover to amlodipine group, and then again at 12 weeks their OGT was done. So it is a crossover study. OGT was done at 3 times at baseline and after each drug therapy. What was found is interesting. 2 hours glucose tolerance, 2 hours glucose after 75 grams of glucose. Amlodipine group did not decrease it significantly, or on the contrary, there was slight increase in the serum blood glucose level at 2 hours after 75 grams of glucose. As against in azilipin, there is slight decrease in the oral glucose. But more importantly, that immunoreactive insulin, it has increased significantly in the amlodipine group, which did not increase significantly in the azilipin group. Comparison of some other laboratory data and peripheral arterial tonometry shows that hsCRP level, which is a marker of inflammation, a good marker of inflammation, and as I said, LFEB levels, HPCA levels, microalbuminuria, all are decreasing significantly in the group of patients who were on azilipin as compared to amlodipine group. This is a Board 2 study. It was done on patients who were on olmesartan and azilipin in type 2 diabetes. It was two-arm study, and the aim point was change in heart rate and blood pressure along with other measurements. What it showed that there is significant decrease in patients who were on the azelaprine group along with olmesartan as compared to olmesartan alone. So the blood pressure decrease was significant, but more important is again as their urinary albumin excretion was more in this group as compared to amlodipine. Now, third interesting result of this study was their maximum carotid intima medius thickness in the group which was assigned to amlodipine there was no significant decrease as against azelaprine group. There was significant decrease in carotid intima media thickness. The TNF alpha levels also decreased significantly, and MCP levels, that is monocyte chemoprotective function factors, also decreased significantly in the group of population which was assigned azelaprine. Now, this is one of the very favorite study for me and very close to my heart. That is evaluation of diastolic function in a population which was assigned to which was given azelaprine. What was done? This was a sub-analysis of patient that is Calvalock trial. In it, almost 230 odd patients of hypertension with normal ejection fraction, that means normal systolic function, and impaired left ventricular relaxation, as measured by septal EVA velocity less than 8 centimeter on tissue Doppler, and they were given 16 milligram of azelaprine for 8 months, and their septal EVA velocity was measured at the end of 8 months. It was divided into whether patient had diabetes or whether they did not have diabetes. Let us not go into that depth of it, but what it says clearly on the left side of screen, the chart shows whether they had diabetes or whether they did not have diabetes. The E prime velocity is increasing from almost -5 or -5.5 to almost -7. That means it is helping in relaxation of the left ventricle. So left ventricular relaxation was more impaired in hypertensive patients with diabetes. We all know that this will happen, and azelaprine helps in relaxation of the left ventricle when it given for 8 months. So friends, at the end I would conclude by some silent features like this, that azelaprine offers 24 hours smooth blood pressure control, including double-digit control, which we always wanted in all our patients. There is superior sympathetic nerve activity reduction as compared to amlodipine. There is reduced proteinuria, decreased glomerular hypertension. There is antioxidant property of this drug. It improves endothelial function. It decreases arterial stiffness. There is decreased BNP levels, and therefore it can be helpful in patients of heart failure. It preserves insulin signaling. As I said, OGT level, oral glucose tolerance is better with this drug. It decreases serum uric acid in hypertensive patients with hyperuricemia. There is cardioprotection, there is neuroprotection, there is nephroprotection, and there is lesser incidence of pedal edema. And it is, of course, a well-tolerated drug. Thank you very much, friends, and let's have some discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh. That was very beautifully summarized. Probably after atenolol, the drug that most of the physicians and cardiologists comfortably used to start is amlodipine. But you have very well highlighted that what are the drawbacks and what are the lacunae that amlodipine has. That it probably does not do anything good to the proteinuria. Sometimes it is reported that it increases proteinuria. And another thing is that the most common reason for withdrawal of amlodipine being pedal edema, because it does not act on the efferent arterioles in the kidneys. And there you have showed us that this drug beautifully acts in the afferent as well as the efferent arterioles in the kidneys, and therefore the pedal edema incidence is almost very less. And on top of it, I think there are other benefits that you have highlighted, it does not interfere with the insulin signaling and is good for diabetic patients. Another thing that usually goes with calcium channel blockers is that they have poor effect on the left ventricular function. But the last study you showed that the diastolic function, which is usually most of the drugs do not address to, is benefited with use of this molecule, as well as it preserves the LV systolic functions as well. So with this, I think we'll have there are few questions that have been asked, and there is a very good question which probably was left out in touching. while the lecture that is asked by Dr. Animesh Chaudhary, and he wants to know what is the role in improving the vascularity in microvasculature. So I think we can start with Dr. Mahesh, you, and then Dr. Sachin to throw in a light where calcium channel blockers, especially Ezlnedipine, it has a different role in microvascular improvement, vasculature improvement.
See, as far as any calcium channel blocker, for that matter, they are dilating the arterioles and therefore definitely will improve the microvasculature. This we especially see in patients who we take for in the cath lab when we are doing primary angioplasty. We want to give some drugs which are causing improvement in either low flow or no flow, and in frustration sometimes we were given intracoronary diltiazem also, and improves significantly the peripheral flow. So what it goes to say that a calcium channel blocker is bound to increase the microvasculature because it is causing peripheral dilatation of the all arterioles. It is not going to add to the microvasculature. That means whatever microvasculature is present will be there, which will be dilated. But we cannot recruit more microvasculatures. Dr. Sachin and Dr. Srivastava, your opinion?
Yes.
See, as you said, Dr. Mahesh, it's very true that any of the calcium channel blockers will be dilating the arterioles, and surely it must be, this molecule must be also dilating, and it must be having effect on the microvasculature. But as such, there are no studies on this, and this should be studied. And it's true about all the calcium channel blockers. Especially, it has been studied with the non-pyrohydrin calcium channel blockers. But surely, I am sure that this must be also the molecule. We need to study about the things, and surely in future that will be studied.
Yeah, probably for microvasculatures, the drugs are again very limited. You have those drugs which improve endothelial dysfunction would be probably acting there better. So ACE inhibitors, statins, they also have some role. And for nitrates, probably the short-acting nitrates, they have a better role. That is what we use in our cath labs. Whereas the long-acting ones actually do not have that beneficial role, maybe because of the coronary steal phenomena that happens. Another question that has been asked by Dr. Shahrukh Golwala is, what is the maximum dose for Ezlnedipine? Are there different doses, or there is one fixed dose, or what is the maximum dose that we can give?
15 milligram has been given in maximum studies, and it is recommended that 8 milligram to be given a person who is more than 75 years of age. Nothing more than that.
Yeah.
So 8 and 16 milligram.
And what is the preferable time is asked by Dr. Kiran Belsare. What is the preferable time, morning or night?
Again, in the because it is acting 24 hours, and all the studies also, if you see, the target was to decrease morning blood pressure, but then drug was given at 8 a.m. in the morning, and it was acting next day morning also. So there is no harm in giving either in the morning or in the evening, but preferably we all give this drug in the morning hours.
That is probably a human reason for that, because morning drugs usually are not forgotten. Late in the evening, you have many engagements, tired from the office, tired from work, and those drugs are forgotten. So forgetting this drug is more harmful than taking it morning or evening. Dr. Sachin, you would like to add something?
Yeah. Even if you see the pharmacokinetic of this drug, it's like which acts beyond the 24 hours, and I would also prefer to give it the morning, and the studies have shown clearly that it has a benefit in the morning also. So it's better to give early morning after breakfast or early morning. That's the timings which are recommended.
Dr. Prajakta has asked, what is the maximum safe dose of Ezlnedipine?
I have no idea, because whatever I have read is 16 milligram only.
Yeah.
You can ask the support staff team. Do you have any idea?
Dr. Veena, probably you can help us there.
Yes, the maximum dose that is tested is 16 milligram only as a Ezlnedipine. There is no further, there are no studies beyond that. There are studies with 8 and 16 milligram, but the ideal dose, the recommended dose is 16 milligram.
Yeah. Well, my guess would be that there would be animal studies where they must have tried beyond this. And calcium channel blockers in general are not very obnoxious drug or very harmful drugs. So probably it should be tolerated. But why cross? Because the studies definitely did show that the benefits are not reaped beyond 16 milligram. So a dose of 16 milligram or beyond is same. So
I think this question must be asked because many of the practices where there is resistant hypertension, they like amlodipine, give it for 20 milligram, or sometimes the dose goes beyond. That's why the question, we have to study about this molecule regarding this aspect. Can we go beyond that? And as you said, Smith, it's very safe drug. All the calcium channel blockers are safe. I think there should be no reason if even you try for that.
Dr. Jay Deshmukh, I think he's from Nagpur. Yeah. He has asked, do you suggest changeover from amlodipine to azellodipine?
It's $1 million question. There is no recommendation as of now. So it is all individual perception that what you want to do. There is no guideline. So I cannot stand and say, please do it. It is all our own perspective, individuality, that whether you want to change or not is your own decision. Because I don't have a backup of guidelines, I cannot say yes. Neither I can say no.
But there can be definitely personal choices by physicians as well as patients.
Yes.
And most of the times the choices are driven by, a few things that you have in mind. And that is sometimes, that is what I started with, that it is difficult from an old, well-tried molecule to switch over to a newer molecule. And therefore, we have this talk, and therefore, we need to, probe into newer drugs, whether the older drugs, definitely they are good, but are the newer drugs better? And if they are better, why not switch over to a better drug if, that can benefit our patients?
I agree with you.
Dr. Sachin, you would like to add?
Yeah. It's like for a new patient who is coming, surely this would be the choice of drug. But obviously, changing the drug, patient acceptance is also very low regarding why the doctor has changed. My blood pressure is controlled. Yeah, obviously, we can try. If the blood pressure is not controlled with this drug, we can add this changing from the amlodipine to the azellodipine. That would be the choice, but not for the, and as there are no recommendation or guidelines to say that we can change from amlodipine. But surely some few of the patients, even who have the controlled blood pressure, we can try and explain them. We'll try this, which is the best drug. It has beyond the blood pressure control, and it's proved in few studies that it's better than amlodipine. So I would try to be changing this amlodipine to azellodipine for few of these kind of patients. Surely
we can think about doing it.
No harm.
We have from studies, so we can recommend to the patients.
Yeah.
Those who are accepting.
Yeah, correct.
Jay has again asked, does it cause edema of feet?
It does cause, but then less percentage. As against amlodipine, which causes almost 20-25%, this causes 4%. There's 4% risk of developing edema of feet.
So because this becomes a very relevant question or relevant problem in our situation, where the summers, usually we get pedal edema in summers with use of calcium channel.
In studies, so that surely it's a very less pedal edema. But in our clinical practice, as we start using, we'll see it's a new drug. It's like, I think it's before lockdown. I have used for 30-35 patients till now. Started from the end of December, Jan, and unfortunately lockdown and COVID situation came. But whatever the patients I have used, there is no pedal edema in this kind of patients on azellodipine. So let's see the future. We don't know about the things.
Yeah,
and as you describe, and we have
for pedal edema, we need to wait for the summer season, the temperatures to rise. Then you'll get real feedback would be there. Okay. So definitely, what happens in trials and what happens in your clinic is there is a gap. Always there is a gap, and your clinical driven decisions are usually more correct because they are more individualized to the patient than the generalized population in the trials. So that is almost all the questions I have covered. There is one more question by Dr. Wagmare where he wants to know if efinodipine or benedipine, which have similar action, can any one of these can be used?
See, as I said that there is no head-to-head trial of benedipine versus azanidipine because it just come recently. However, it's not that recent. It's almost 8 years now that trials are ongoing with azanidipine. Benedipine also is almost 10 years now that trials are ongoing. So it appears that pharmacologically both drug appears to be almost similar. Ifnodipine, azanidipine, and benedipine, they are all almost same level. So there should be almost a similarity in their action and their benefits. But then there is no head-to-head trial available with us. As against with amlodipine, we have the trials. So we can say that it is better than amlodipine.
Okay, there is a compliment from Dr. Kiran Balsare to Dr. Mahesh that the beard suits you.
He is my friend.
I think that is why Sachin also did not shave.
Yeah,
I'm the only one who's without a beard.
During the trial run, I saw the Mahesh. I didn't shave that why. Smith is very smart. He's always with the shaving.
I have now gray beard, so I have to be clean shaved now.
So that's also look smart, gray beard also.
So I think we can conclude. There are no more questions. If there are any questions, we can include it in the discussion right now.
Okay.
So,
Veena would like to say something?
yeah. Should we conclude? Yes, sir. On the behalf of Ajanta, I thank Dr. Mahesh Fulvani for the wonderful talk. For the wonderful talk. I also thank Dr. Smith Srivastava for carrying out the moderating the session wonderfully, and the question answer sessions was really interactive and was good. And I also thank our panelist, Dr. Sachin Lakhade, for giving a lot of inputs on this management of hypertension, and also you said also that you have used azanidipine in few of the patients. That really gives much of confidence to the delegates. I thank all the delegates who have joined at this session, and I'm sure that there was a value add in this session. And I thank all the entire HO team of Ajanta, the field force especially, and the technical team for making this program a success. And I thank one and all. Thank you all.
On part of the participants, I'd like to thank Ajanta, especially Mr. Kanu Agrawal. He had tolerated us because I had been repeatedly asking him to send this, send that link and all those things, and he could, bear me. And definitely would like to thank Ajanta also for giving us a platform to meet my friends, Dr. Sachin and Dr. Mahesh. It was very good, and many of the other doctors who have, I have only had their prescriptions coming to Raipur, Dr. Deshmukh and others. So I know them by prescriptions. By this had given me a chance to interact with them also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.